you've had a day. You've had a day basically to process the fact that Tottenham has won a trophy that you can't make. I mean, you can still make fun of them, let's be honest, but that Ange Postecoglou has gone from clown to the big bad manager who called his shot. But I'm going to level with you for a hot second. The guy that looks a lot like me, but definitely 100% is not me, and don't get it twisted, he just isn't. Zealand made a video about Ange Postecoglou a few years ago that I watched. Okay. And that video details a career of really stunning success in turning around both club teams and the Australian national team into an effective winning force. And oftentimes the winning was happening in cup competitions and not necessarily the league. I mean, there is no league for Australia to play in. What did he win? The Asian Cup. The biggest trophy the Australian national team has ever won. Less than 10 years after joining Asia. And people forget, people that are my age, basically, and younger, forget that there was a very long period where Australia was virtually irrelevant in soccer, as I would call it, and as a lot of them would call it, football, right? Australia had not made a World Cup until, I believe, 2002, something like that, maybe 98. They've made every one since. Obviously, Oceania helped with that, but they've been able to survive what at times and right now as well has been a rigorous qualifying cycle in order to go through multiple intercontinental playoffs and beat Syria in extra time, beat Peru in penalties just to get to the World Cup. He managed to take that team and topple mighty Japan, Saudi Arabia, hapless South Korea that even though they have enough talent to win it, haven't won an Asian Cup since 1961, Iran, right? Teams that are objectively better based off their World Cup performance generally and actually win with that team. And it's not alone. The language doesn't matter. Anywhere in the world, Ange Postecoglou would win things, right? In a way that, to be perfectly honest, most managers don't. Even Ruben Amorim, it was always in one country. When you really deep it, it's not, Ruben Amorim's a brilliant manager. There's a reason he was the hot prospect in the managerial market, a coup for Manchester United to get him with the talent they had on the team. But he'd only really done it in one country. He'd done it with a couple teams. He'd proved, as you need to as a manager sometimes, that you didn't just get lucky with the one team you were coaching. You went to another team and started fucking winning again. But Ruben Amorim hasn't really proved he could do it in another country. Right? In most managers, it's a pretty limited window of where and who they are winning with. And what always made Ange special to me and made him stand out to me was that it didn't fucking matter. If he was in the backwoods in Australia, if he was in Japan, if he was in Scotland, if he was coaching the national team of his country, he won games. Multiple teams in Australia, right? Japan, Scotland. He just won games. Language barrier be damned. You put this guy in a locker room to help teach you how to play football, he is not going to turn into Steven Gerrard trying to say Al Eddie Faki. He is going to get the team to win. And that's why I was so damn surprised at how this season had gone for Tottenham. They suck. The team's been terrible. Everybody deals with injuries. It's modern football. You play 13 months out of the year and you got like 20 guys to do it with. You're going to be missing somebody. You're going to be playing a striker at center back. It happens. Tottenham's not the only team it happened to, and they were still ass cheeks the entire year. But they weren't ass cheeks in one competition, the Europa League. Because Ange, and really his specialty, is being able to snake his team into cup competitions and win them. He has what I've described as a bit of the Jose Mourinho. I said this a little bit in the last video that I made where we talked more about the match broadly, but he's not full Jose Mourinho. That guy took Porto to win the Champions League, okay? But he has a piece of it. I'm not saying he's, as much of a football terrorist as Jose Mourinho can be, but he kind of was in the last game. He kind of was in that past game. And when I'm talking about having a bit of Jose Mourinho and the kind of product, like the result over process orientation to the mindset, right? Being able to focus entirely on what you need to do and what levers you need to pull in order to win that game, not build a team up through a process. It's also his ability to handle criticism in a way that kind of galvanizes his team. He is not somebody that sidesteps confrontational questions with canned answers. He is a very direct, unafraid of confrontation, open manager. And I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised if you talk to people that actually played on his teams and played for him, it would be this, they would have the same thing to say about the way he conducts himself in private. This was an interview, and just remember this kind of before the game. The day before the game, this is the press conference. This is the one question in particular that a lot of people fixated on. And I want to play it now that the game has already happened, that Ange is etched into the annals of Tottenham history.
Hi, Ange. If you win tomorrow night, this is going to be remembered as one of the best seasons in the club's modern history. But kind of conversely, if you lose, it might be remembered for one of the worst league seasons in the club's modern history. I just wondered if you're kind of conscious that you're walking a fine line between kind of two very different types of infamy and history, really.
That depends on your outlook, Dan, but I'll tell you one thing, irrespective of tomorrow, I'm not a clown. I never will be, mate, and you're really disappointed that you would use such terminology about a person who, for 26 years, without any favours from anyone, who's worked his way to be in a position where he's leading out a club in a European major competition. For you to suggest that somehow us not being successful means that I'm a clown, not really sure how to answer that question.
So you might be wondering what the hell he's talking about. So the guy wrote, Dan Kilpatrick here, wrote an article, said Ange teetering between hero and clown with Tottenham legacy on the line in the Europa League final. So Ange, I don't know if he read it himself, if he had, this is the way it can work sometimes, if he had people from the media team kind of come to him and present the fact that this had been written about him and be like, hey, if Dan Kilpatrick asks a question, he kind of wrote this article and he said, you're a fucking idiot. No, he said, you're a clown. And if you want to respond to that, this is kind of no holds barred. And it not in a way where I think he's trying to demean Dan, but in a way where he's pointing out, cutting through the bullshit, right? He's not playing the game. Is Ange Postecoglou the best manager in the world? No. Is he close? Probably not. But I'd run through a brick wall for the man. And the same could not be said for probably the majority of managers that exist out there, because he is almost an antidote to the way that a lot of managers talk about and handle things. And he has an ability to cut through bullshit that is incredibly valuable, I think, in cup competitions. Because what it can do is help keep the team focused, right? It can help keep the team I mean, the team was very focused for this game because everybody was talking about Ange. Everybody was talking about this press conference and whatever. Nobody was looking at the team. I mean, they were potentially talking about the injuries. No Kulusevski, no James Maddison, right? But it was all Ange. And the fact that he went out and said that in August essentially shielded his team in cup competitions, because every time they were going into a cup competition, he's going to be asked about, well, in your second season, you said you always win things. And he's like, it's a statement of fact, because in the second year he's managed a team, he's always won a trophy, which is a badass statement of fact that he will now be able to continue. So what was the point of this video? I wanted to give Ange his own video, because perhaps more than I think any of us realized, it was going to take a different type of manager to lead Tottenham to this victory. And much the same as Tottenham fans, and I kind of celebrated that in the video yesterday about the game itself, as much as they deserved their moment in the sun to say, ha, bah, you know, Ange did too. Because everybody was laughing at him when he said that at the beginning of the year, and then the season started to turn sour a little bit later. Every time they'd get knocked out of a competition, people would call him a clown, even though he didn't, you know, he thought that that was a vulgar term, for lack of a better word, for a journalist to use, which I honestly kind of agree, but he's using the word clown to try and get clicks. To be honest, if only he, you know, if he had this type of forehead to show off to get the clicks themselves, then you wouldn't have to worry about using the word clown. But not all of us can be this vertically blessed. I wanted to give him the praise and the opportunity to just, this is your moment, man. And we might get an Eric Ten Hag situation where he's gone by November because they're in 18th in the league. Because for whatever reason, the injuries and the signings, they're just not working with him and he can't get it rolling. It's not like Ange Postecoglou's ever spent 10 years at a club to build it up. All right, he spent a couple of years at Yokohama F. Marinos. He spent a couple of years at Celtic. Right, this is a guy that is able to come in and get your team to win, but he is not. I mean, if he was, then he probably wouldn't be here, right? He'd still be at some other club that he'd manage, right? But he's not somebody that sits there and maybe builds it for 10, 15 years. Maybe he's hoping he can do that with Tottenham, but he hasn't necessarily shown that skill set yet. He might be somebody like Bielsa that wears out his welcome or something. But Ange Postecoglou was right, and almost everybody else was wrong. He was able to get this team over the line and do something that for basically the entire time I've been following this sport didn't happen, wouldn't happen, couldn't happen, was unthinkable. I mean, if you'd gone up to somebody in January and told them that this was the year Tottenham won a trophy, everybody would have laughed you out of the room. And yet here we are at the end of all these press conferences and the end of all these questions, and a lot of people thinking Ange wouldn't even make it to this final. And the damn guy won the whole thing. That is a little bit of Jose Mourinho. It really is. And you know, there's a dangerous thing about firing a Jose Mourinho is your team usually gets worse when they leave. And I don't really know if they can afford that right now, to be honest.